For centuries, philosophy has treated reality as a strict division. On one side, the physical universe functions like mechanical clockwork. On the other, the ethereal human mind exists as a separate, isolated entity. By the early 20th century in Britain, the dominant intellectual movement was idealism. This school argued that reality was inherently mental, existing only as a product of the mind. In 1920, the philosopher Samuel Alexander challenged this consensus with his masterwork, Space, Time, and Deity. He intended to reverse the idealist assumption entirely. Alexander led a movement known as British emergentism. He argued that the mind has no special supernatural origin. Instead, a physical universe of space and time possesses the capacity to engineer matter, life, consciousness, and eventually, God. Alexander viewed the universe as a self-building organism, one that continuously constructs higher levels of existence from the ground up. Alexander championed New Realism, a movement focused on de-anthropomorphizing the universe. He sought to remove the human mind from the center of reality and treat it as a natural object among other natural objects. This commitment to objective reality aligned him with major logicians of his era, including Bertrand Russell. They shared a drive to analyze the world as it exists independently of human observation. At the University of Manchester, Alexander spent decades refining his metaphysical system within these Gothic walls. While many of his peers focused on narrow logical puzzles, Alexander pursued a comprehensive map of existence. He traced the development of the world from its simplest physical roots to its highest theological possibilities. To follow his logic to its theological conclusion, we must first learn how reality is built at its absolute base layer. We begin with pure space. In this animated diagram, we see an infinite, empty 3D grid. Alexander argued that space, viewed in isolation from time, is a featureless blank. It lacks the structure needed to distinguish one point from another. Now we introduce a ticking linear timeline. This represents time in isolation. Time without space is equally limited. It becomes a fleeting now that cannot support a sequence of events or a stable structure. Because neither can exist alone, they must be fused together. This produces motion, or space-time, the single foundational substance of Alexander's universe. Because this substance is the basis of everything, it possesses universal categorical features. Properties like causality, identity, and substance are simply the inherent characteristics of space-time itself. Every object and relation in the universe is constructed directly from space-time. It functions as the concrete raw material of existence rather than an abstract stage for events. When we look at the micro level of space-time, we see how complexity begins. The fluid surface of motion ripples and folds into dense, localized knots. This is the mechanism of emergence. When spatiotemporal knots reach a threshold of complexity, a totally new empirical quality appears. Here is the first leap. As the knot hits its threshold, it snaps into a solid, textured form, matter. Matter is composed entirely of space-time motions, yet it exhibits mass and inertia, properties that did not exist in pure geometry. As matter continues to aggregate and its motions become more intricate, life emerges as the next quality in the hierarchy. This upward movement is driven by the nisus, an inherent, directional striving within spacetime that forces the universe toward higher complexity. This large vector arrow represents the nisus, the underlying evolutionary force that pulls the entire system forward. The universe acts as an engine driven by the nisus, continuously extracting higher forms of existence from geometric motion. Eventually, the biological cluster reaches a frenetic level of complexity and sparks with electricity, emerging as mind. Consciousness is the physical expression of this biological vitality, no more supernatural than mass appearing in matter. Alexander used the term compresence, shown by this connecting line, to explain how the mind interacts with its environment. Compresence means the mind and the objects it observes exist on the same level of reality. They interact just as physical objects interact with one another. This means we perceive the world directly. There are no internal mental representations filtering our view of the physical objects around us. By grounding consciousness in physics, Alexander also had to ground human values in nature. He compared human artistic and moral efforts to animal instinct. Just as a beaver instinctively assembles a dam, humans construct values like beauty and goodness. These values are not abstract ideals existing in a void outside our universe. They are human inventions constructed to satisfy social and creative impulses. Like any other emergent trait, they are shaped by Darwinian natural selection to aid the survival of the species. By removing the mind from its unique metaphysical status, Alexander placed human achievement in the same evolutionary framework as the rest of the natural world. We can now see the hierarchy of reality, space-time at the base, followed by matter, life, and mind. But the nisus continues its work. The vector of evolution pushes past mind into the empty space above the current peak. Alexander argued that the universe is currently in the process of engendering its next emergent quality. He labeled this future quality deity. In a radical theological shift, God does not precede the world as its creator. Instead, God is the future product of the universe's evolution. This solves the classical problem of evil. If God is not yet finished, he cannot be held responsible for the current miseries of the world. Currently, God exists as the physical world itself and as its collective, forward striving toward that future perfection. Alexander's emergent theology aligns with the pantheism of Baruch Spinoza. Pantheism views God and nature as identical, a comparison Alexander proudly acknowledged. Like Spinoza, Alexander saw reality as a single substance. However, he updated the concept by describing this substance as dynamic and alive with time. His life's work is preserved here at the John Rylands Library in Manchester, housing his extensive philosophical papers. While the specifics of his system eventually fell out of favor, his effort to bridge relativistic physics, Darwinian biology, and naturalistic theology remains a rare, comprehensive map of the whole of reality. Samuel Alexander presents a vision of a self-building engine, a universe whose internal striving actively engineers its own divinity.